This is the third video in a series of videos where we're kind of reviewing some of the questions on the midterm because you're going to see this information again on the final exam, and some of you struggled, and I think some of it was maybe you were in a hurry and didn't pay close attention to how the question was worded. So I'm picking up with question number 15, and it says the x coordinate. Okay, so one thing about this particular problem, when you look at it, is it's asking you, I'm having trouble here, get it situated. It's asking you for the x coordinate, okay, which would mean the first value or the first coordinate in the parentheses of the midpoint. Okay, so when I say that word midpoint, that makes me automatically think about the midpoint formula, which again was at the top of the midterm. At the very beginning, you were given a list of formulas that you could refer back to, and this was one of them. So that for the midpoint, we have x sub 1 plus x sub 2, and then that's divided by 2, because midpoint is sort of like saying the halfway point. And then we would do the same thing, y1 plus y2 all divided by 2 to get the y value. Now in this case, you only had to kind of do half the problem because the question only asked for the x coordinate. So if I look at my ordered pairs, I have x1, y1, that's 3, negative 4. Then I have x2, y2, which is my second point, and I'm going to basically plug and chug. So I would have 3 plus negative 1 all divided by 2. 3 plus negative 1 is the same as 3 minus 1, which would be 2, and 2 divided by 2 is 1. So the x coordinate of the midpoint is 1. And guys, there was no need to figure the y coordinate. It doesn't ask me about the y coordinate, and so I don't want to waste my time. I can basically put in my answer and move on to the next question. Question 16 refers to the distance. Okay, again, that's a formula, and it was at the beginning of the midterm, and the formula for distance is x2, the square root of the quantity, x sub 2 minus x sub 1 squared, added to y sub 2 minus y sub 1 squared. And so then again, at this point, it becomes a plug and chug. Okay, so we have x1, y1 is my first ordered pair, and then I have x2, y2 as my second ordered pair. And it doesn't matter which one you label first and which one you label second. I tend to work left to right. So I would have distance equals the square root of 5 minus a negative 3 squared plus 1 minus 4 squared. Then I'm going to do a little bit of a simplification here. So I have the square root of 5 minus 3 minus a negative 3 is really 5 plus 3 squared plus 1 minus 4 gives me negative 3 squared. So I have the square root of 5 plus 3 is 8. So I have 8 squared plus negative 3 squared, which is going to give me the square root. 8 squared is 64 plus negative 3 squared is 9. And so I end up with the square root of 73. And I believe on the midterm it asks you to round that answer to 2 decimal places rather than entering it as a square root. So if you take the square root of 73, you get approximately 8.54. 4. Okay, again, guys, you got to pay attention on how you should enter your answers. Number 17 has to do with finding the center and the radius of the circle. And again, the formula for a circle was given at the beginning of the exam. A circle has the formula x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. And the center is hk, and r, or the radius, is r. So basically, this is one where you hopefully can just look at it and figure it out, but you want to make sure things match. Okay, so I have x minus 3. So h here is 3. There's my plus. Y plus, but it needs to be a minus. So you got to remember that this would have been y minus a minus 1 in there to make it a plus. So the k is negative 1. Then I still have my square. But then I know that the r square is 16. And I need to solve for r. And so to solve for r there, you would take the square root. Now really it's positive or negative 4, but remember we're talking about the radius or a distance on a circle, so it has to be positive. So my center is going to be 3, negative 1, and my radius is positive 4. A lot of you were giving me 16 as the value for the radius, but guys, remember you need to take the square root, not half. Okay, so pay attention. Question 18 also deals with a circle, but it's a little bit more involved because it actually wants you to write the equation of the circle, and it's giving you the endpoints of the diameter. So it may help you to think about a picture here. Okay, so we know eventually we're going to have a circle, and we know that one endpoint is negative 2, positive 5, and the other end is 2, negative 3. Now, this is not drawn to any kind of scale, but hopefully you can kind of get an idea of the picture. So that's the endpoints of your diameter, and the diameter goes all the way across the circle. Well, we really need the center point in order to write the equation of the circle. And the center would be the halfway point. So in this case, the center is the midpoint of the diameter. So I need to find the midpoint between negative 2, 5 and 2, negative 3. Again, the midpoint formula was given to you at the beginning of the test. So we would have negative 2 plus 2 divided by 2. And my y's, I would have 5 plus negative 3 over 2. So if I simplify that, I have negative 2 plus 2 is 0 divided by 2. 5 plus negative 3 is 2 over 2. So ultimately I have 0, 1 as my center. Okay, so if that's my center, the h coordinate is 0 and the the k coordinate is 2. And then the other tricky part is I need the radius. Okay, so we know that this point here in the center is 0, 1. And I need the distance or the radius, which is halfway. So we go from the center to the point on the circle. And it doesn't matter which direction I go. So, but I really need to find the distance between the center and one of those endpoints. And again, the distance formula was given to you at the beginning of the test. I'm writing it down here again for you. One of the things you might want to do as you think about preparing for the final is you may want to make sure you write down those formulas that are given to you at the beginning of the test, or remember that they're there so you go back and use them as you need to. So let's figure the radius. So we're going from 2 minus 0 squared plus negative 3 minus 1 squared. So that's going to give me the square root of positive 2 squared plus negative 4 squared. Got to keep working a little bit. Okay, so we have 2 squared is 4. Negative 4 squared is positive 16. So we have the square root of 20. 16 plus 4 is 20. And then I need to simplify that, and that's going to be, let's see, 20 is 4 times 5. So that's 2 on the square root of 5. Okay. Then, so that's our radius. That's r. So if we plug into our circle formula, which again was at the beginning of the problem, x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared, I would have x minus 0 squared plus y minus 1 squared equals 2 square root 5 squared. Okay, so if I simplify this a little bit, normally we wouldn't write the minus 0, so that could become just x squared plus y minus 1 squared equals, and then I need to square this. So 2 square root 5 times 2 square root 5. 2 times 2 is 4. Square root 5 times square root 5 is square root 25, which simplifies to 5 and ultimately gives me a value of 20. So you would have x squared plus y minus 1 squared equals 20. And that's ultimately, and again, there's lots of steps. And guys, it may help you to maybe use colored pencils or colored pens if you prefer, and do the steps and things in color to help you keep things straight. All right, number 19 is an inequality. So we have negative 13 less than 3x plus 2 less than 11. So this is kind of one of those problems where you have two problems, because you have the front end of the problem and you also have the back end of the problem. So if I solve the front end first, okay, so I have negative 13 is less than 3x plus 2. I subtract 2. So I have negative 15 is less than 3x. I'm then going to divide by 3. So I have negative 5 is less than x. Now notice I didn't invert here because I divided by a positive 3. Okay, not a negative. All right, then I'm going to go back. I'm going to do the back end. I have 3x plus 2 is less than 11. I'm going to subtract 2. So I have 3x is less than 9. I'm going to divide both sides by 3. So I have x is less than 3. Now, it may help you to view this on a number line. Okay, so here's what we're saying. We've got negative 5. Somewhere in here will be 0. Here's 3. So we're saying that x is less than 3. So we have an open circle at 3 because it's not included, and less than goes to the left. Now be careful on this other one because you got to read it backwards. X is greater than negative 5. So we have negative 5 as our focal point. Again, it's not included, and we want to be greater than Okay, be careful. And so we're looking for this overlap, and the overlap occurs between, whoops, excuse me, wrong symbol, occurs between, I did it again, occurs between -5 and +3, and neither endpoint is included, so you should use parentheses. Don't make Miss Ralston's mistake of trying to use brackets. It should be parentheses because neither point is included. All right, number 20 asks you to find the slope of the line through 2 points. Again, slope was a formula provided to you at the beginning of the test. It's the change in the y, so y2 minus y1 over the change in x, x2 minus x1. And so we would have, again, it may help you to label the points, keep yourself organized. So we have x1, y1, x2, y2. So we have 1 minus a -5 over -2 minus 4. That gives us 1 plus 5, and -2 minus 4 is -6. So I have 1 plus 5 is 6 over -6, which simplifies to -1. So the slope is -1. And that's all they asked for. All right, question 21 says, what is the slope of the line whose equation is 4x minus 2y equals 8? I kind of figured out what most of you were doing here. Most of you were looking at the equation and you were telling me it's 4. Guys, you can't do that because in order to read the slope directly from this equation, the equation needs to be in slope intercept form, which means it needs to be in the form y equals mx plus b. This form that you're given here is the standard form, which is ax plus by equals c. So there's different forms of a line. So if you're going to try to read it from the equation that's given, the first thing you have to do is solve for y. So I'm going to subtract 4x from either side. So I have -2y equals -4x plus 8. I'm then going to divide everything by -2, excuse me, because I'm trying to solve for y. So I have y equals +2. -4 divided by -2 is +2x. 8 divided by -2 is -4. And I'm asked for the slope. And in this format, y equals mx plus b. The slope is m, so the slope is +2. Question 22 was a true-false question. It says slopes of perpendicular lines are equal. And that is a false statement. Okay, a couple of things to remember as you think about perpendicular and parallel lines. Parallel lines, which visually look something like this, they run side by side, they never cross and intersect. They do have the same or equal slopes. But perpendicular lines are lines that intersect, and they intersect at or create a right angle. And the slopes of perpendicular lines, we say they are negative reciprocals. So if the slope of my first line, for example, is 3/4, then the slope of my perpendicular line would be negative 4/3. The idea of a reciprocal, remember, is you flip it over, and the word negative means to change the sign. Okay, I've got 2 to go. I'm going to try to finish them up in this video. It might be a little long, but I'm going to try to finish them up. It says 23 says select the equation of the line written in, okay, this was key because some of you marked the wrong one, in slope-intercept form. So you need the equation in the form y equals mx plus b that passes through the points 2, 3, and negative 1, 7. Okay, so this is kind of a 2-step problem. In the first step, you need to find the slope using the formula that you were given at the beginning of the test. Okay, so we have x1, y1, x2, y2. And so we're going to substitute into our slope formula, which is y2 minus y1 equals x2 minus x1. Notice how each time I use the formula, I write it down. That keeps me from making a mistake. So I have 7 minus 3 over negative 1 minus 2. 7 minus 3 is 4. Minus 1 minus 2 is negative 3. So my slope is negative 4/3. The second step is I have to find B, or the y-intercept. So I can take a point, I'm going to use the point 2, 3, and the slope, and I'm going to plug into the slope-intercept form. So y is positive 3 equals negative 4/3, times 2 plus b. And remember, I'm ultimately trying to solve for b. So I have 3 equals negative 4/3 times 2 is going to be negative 8/3 plus b. Then I want to add 8/3 to either side. So I have 3 and 8/3 equal to b. Now if I simplify that fraction a little bit, 3 times 3 is 9, plus 8 is 17/3. So my y-intercept is 17/3. So if I write the equation in slope-intercept form, I have y equals negative 4/3 x mx plus 17/3. And that's your answer. Okay, and finally, question 24 says, is the equation of the x equals 5 is the equation of the horizontal line through the point x equals 5. And this is kind of, I believe it was on the test as a true or false. And again, this is false. Now, a couple of things that would have helped you out. Again, in the formula section at the beginning, it showed you that the formula of a horizontal line would be y equals b, and that the form of, I think I got it wrong. The form of a vertical line is x equals a number, okay? And so sometimes it helps me to visualize it. If I visualize going to x equals 5 and then using any values for y, I kind of get a picture in my mind. So actually, Ms. Ralston got it wrong the first time. Okay, so this is actually a true statement that x equals 5 is the equation of I'm sorry, I had it right the first time. Having trouble. I'm doing it in too big of a hurry. It is a false statement because this would be a vertical line, not a horizontal line. So that one word makes a big difference. I had it right the first time. It is false. Okay. Sorry about that. But again, if you just go back and look, take your time. Even though there's a 2-hour time limit, you had 24 questions. So roughly you had 5 minutes per question. You need to take your time and pay attention.